What's good, guys? Kalen from Warhorse. So today we're going to be talking squats. Squat is one of the big motor patterns that we like to train here. Pretty much everybody we have here does some form of squat in one form or another. Typically, if we're in doubt about where to start somebody out as far as squat goes, our go-to is going to be a goblet squat, oftentimes with a little bit of heel elevation too. So what we're looking at for our goblet squat, Jacqueline can demo this right now. We'll get either a kettlebell or a dumbbell for it. We're going to bring our kettlebell up. And things we're looking for in this rack position, we want a little bit of space from our body, not a ton, maybe about an inch or so. We want those elbows underneath the bell as well. From here, I want Jacqueline to think about creating even pressure between her heel and the ball of her foot. And all we're going to do, we're just going to sink straight down from this position, and we'll come right back up. And those are the very basics of our goblet squat. As far as heel elevation goes, we'll kind of use that on a case-by-case basis. If you have somebody who really tends to excessively kind of sit back in their squat, or maybe somebody who just has longer legs relative to their body, it's going to be a good place to start. We will use it for other people as well, just because something we tend to look for in our squats is a relatively squatty squat, especially for our people who aren't powerlifters, aren't just interested in lifting as much weight as they can. A couple things to look out for when you're squatting. I think one of the first things I would mention would be an unstacked trunk position. So we already covered this in our video about hinges, but one of the big things we like to look for in a lot of these patterns is our rib cage and our pelvis being stacked over each other at the same point. If you haven't found that position before, an easy way you can find it, you can think about taking your belt buckle, tucking towards your chin just a little bit, put your hand right here, and Jacqueline, I just want you to take a really, really full exhale out, and I want you to feel what happens. And what you'll feel is that your rib cage almost naturally drops down a little bit. And we're looking to see if we can find that position, then maintain it the entire time we're squatting. So if somebody has a difficult time finding this, what you can do, you can either coach them up on a stack a little bit, or alternately, you can just pair them with a movement that's a little bit more front-loaded. Something like a goblet squat meets the criteria here. Something like a front squat meets the criteria here. A Zercher squat would meet the criteria here, as well as an SSB, and they might just find that position a little bit more naturally. I think another thing that we'll often see a lot is somebody losing balance in their squat. So Jacqueline, I want you to demo getting a little bit too on your heels in your squat. And we'll see what that looks like. So you'll see here, Jacqueline's losing her balance backwards a little bit, which is a pretty common fault we'll see. A lot of times this will happen when somebody's been coached to feel their heels a little bit too much, put all their weight in their heels. That's not what we're looking for. Typically just cueing a little bit more pressure on that forefoot, feeling heavy in the ball of your foot. We'll clean things up there. And then the other side of the spectrum, we'll have somebody who will fall a little bit too forward on their foot. So you notice the heels will come up a little bit. Oftentimes with these folks, just cueing a little bit more heel pressure, not putting all your weight in your heels, but making sure you can feel them the whole time. We'll fix that issue up. And also just squatting barefoot can be very, very helpful for this same issue. Another issue that we'll see in our squats is people just sitting their hips back a little bit too excessively. Should look something like this, which can cause a variety of faults as a result of that. We'll often see people get too hard on their heels as a result of this. We see people lose their stack, and it turns a little bit more into more of a hinge pattern than a squat pattern. Oftentimes with these folks, a little bit of heel elevation can do some wonders, but also just cueing them to squat straight down, or maybe even in some cases push their knees forward a little bit more can do the trick as well. On the other side of the spectrum, we'll have people who don't really know how to shift their hips back in space at all, and will almost squat a little bit too straight down. Jacqueline, would you like to demo that? In these cases, we can cue this in a variety of ways. The go-to cue that a lot of people would use to fix this issue would be to sit your hips back. We personally don't use that one a whole lot, just because we find it ties into a lot of kind of overextension. It's very easily overdone. Couple cues that might work a little bit better. Jacqueline, you could think about pulling your obliques towards your legs on the way down. Give that a try, see how it feels. That'd be one way we could go about it. You could also think about just letting your chest lean a little bit more on the way down. And thinking about it in those two ways will facilitate a little bit more of that stacked trunk position that we like to look for. We have a variety of squat variations that we train here. If in doubt, goblet's a good place to start with most people. You can always move up from there if it looks pretty easy for them. From there is very flexible depending on the individual. If somebody's a power lifter, maybe a back squat is going to be their go-to. So Jacqueline, would you like to demo a back squat?
Say how we'll never do this.
Yeah, so quick thing to note, in terms of when we unrack our squats, we always want to back up when we're bringing that bar to the rack and re-rack forward. The reason being, you're going to be a lot more fatigued when you're re-racking the bar, and we don't want it to be precarious in such a way that you have to walk backwards when you're already very fatigued for your squat set. For demonstration purposes, just so you guys can see, Jacqueline will be walking forward though. We have two types of back squats we can do. We have a low bar back squat, which Jacqueline is demoing right now, so we'll get a couple reps of that. Very nice. You'll notice with the low bar back squat, the bar rests on the rear delts, a little bit lower down the back. We'll see a little bit more forward lean with this, a little bit more hinge in it. For most people, I would say 9 out of 10 individuals will squat a little bit more with this style. And Jacqueline, would you like to demo a high bar back squat? High bar back squat, the bar is going to be on the upper traps. We'll see a little bit more of an upright torso position. Typically a little bit more range of motion with these as well. So squattier squat. If somebody's not interested in powerlifting, this is probably the way to go for them. We have a couple other squat variations we like to train here. So Jacqueline, you can bring that bar back in the rack real quick, and we'll just demo a front squat real quick. If you have somebody who really struggles to find kind of a squatty squat, a front squat can be a very useful variation to teach us. The reason being, if we hinge a front squat a lot, it's just going to fall out of our hands at a certain point. So it forces a little bit more of an upright trunk position. This often pairs well with a little bit of heel elevation as well. Jacqueline, would you like to give that a try? Furthermore, that bar is on the front of our body, so it's also going to allow us to find a little bit more of a stacked trunk position, which can be very useful in just creating more depth and just the squat feeling a little bit better overall. And then if you have somebody who really struggles to find something of a stacked trunk position, you can always use a Zercher squat. So Jacqueline, would you like to demo a Zercher squat? So obviously, we would like to set up in the rack for that and not actually just drop it into our elbows from a front squat position. But Zercher squat is probably going to be our most front-loaded squat variation. You'll see very, very upright trunk position here. Very easy to maintain that stack. So in an instance where that's something that somebody really struggles with, this can be an excellent variation to find the position. Another variation we won't be demoing today is a safety squat bar. We find that this is a variation that feels good for a lot of people. We'd say it's probably our go-to for a lot of folks after a goblet squat. But really, at the end of the day, the variation is going to come down to the individual, what their goals are, how they move, and what they can execute properly. And that's squats.